Oh my god, it's the again, covering One Direction again. Sometimes people are just passionate about one thing. I will not be silenced. Anyway, so there's this thing that people say these days a lot. I'm sure you've heard of it. Roman Empire. Slang expression for something that someone constantly thinks about, inspired and popularized by the belief that most men often think about the actual Roman Empire and its legacy. So like something so monumental that it just cannot leave your brain. The ultimate Roman Empire, some may say. 9 years ago today when Zayn left One Direction. Everyone remembers where they were, I really mean that.
I was in 4th grade getting sent home for crying too much and becoming a distraction. I blacked it out from my mind. I was in my freshman dorm. I got my tonsils removed and cried so bad I had to go back to the hospital because of throat irritation. I was on the first day of spring break. Ruined my whole time off. The next day, I wore all black to school to show that I was in mourning. I was in 2nd grade. I saw it on the Ellen show and cried so hard I almost threw up. I was in PE class. I was at my childhood best friend's house. I sobbed in front of her great-grandma. I was at the dentist, and the assistant broke the news to everyone while crying.
Also, 98% of you said that Zayn left a bigger impact on the world than George Washington. So I just thought I would mention that too, because, you know, it says a lot. I think Zayn leaving One Direction was like the pop culture moment of the 2010s, or at least the late 2010s, because there was some pretty crazy stuff that happened in like the early 2010s, but it was just one of the pop culture moments, and I feel like its impact just cannot be recreated. So today I want to explore just everything about it. I want to explore the lead up to the news, reasons why, the aftermath, the impact, and then a little bit on like the fall of One Direction into the announcement of their hiatus following Zayn leaving. Essentially just one big timeline exploration of how all of this dominoed into each other and ended with One Direction disbanding. In 2016, most especially, I feel like Zayn opened up so much about the real reasons why he was feeling like he needed to leave One Direction. And that truth is the grueling work schedule, the rules, the machine-like process. For one thing, Zayn was so overworked throughout his time in One Direction that in 2014 he developed an eating disorder. I realized that I wasn't eating as much just down to the amount of work that we were doing. Our schedule was kind of crazy, so we were all over the place. And this comes from an overwhelming cycle that One Direction faced from the beginning of recording an album, doing a whole bunch of promo for it, going on a tour, and then immediately starting to work on a new album while still touring the one from before, and then kind of just doing it all over again and again and again. I kind of talk more in detail about that grueling work cycle in my video called The Rise and Fall of Psycho Music, one of my most viewed videos of all times. Y'all just eat it up when I talk about industry mistreatment, I guess, But not only was there this insane, grueling workload being in this band, but also Zayn struggled a lot with inauthenticity. There's a few interviews where he cites the lack of authenticity in One Direction as like one of the main reasons he wanted to leave. He didn't like their style of music at all, which you can kind of see if you listened to One Direction and then listened to his solo stuff. He says that he didn't connect to the music personally at all, which is such a huge part of being a musician and an artist. They just wouldn't let him put his own spin or like creativity on anything that they did and just wanted it to be very generic pop kind of thing and very manufactured pop. He said it would be the smallest things, like a vocal run or adjustment that he would want to do, like he would want to put his own spin on his voice, and they would say no and make him re-record this like vocal part over and over again until it sounded exactly like whatever they wanted. Inauthenticity was something that was always underlying and ended up as the main factor of me leaving in the end. It was about denying the authenticity of who I was and what I enjoyed about music and why I got into it. That was always there. It was one of the things that wasn't going to go away, so I had to go away. And just to rub salt in the wound a tad more, he also literally said, "None of the songs that I wrote in One Direction were personal to me." So Zayn wrote on Change Your Ticket, Clouds, Fool's Gold, Last First Kiss, Night Changes, Story My Life, and Summer Love. Or co-wrote, I should specify. But yeah, I can see how these songs are a little impersonal to him. And I think it's a little sad to think about. You finally get a chance to be this big musician and like create music that you want to pour yourself into, but then simply not being allowed to have a lick of input because you're basically a robot being programmed to adhere to a set of values created by like a 50-year-old white man who wants you to appeal to an audience of tween girls. And like in Zayn's defense, because I know a lot of people are like, well, he joined the band, he signed the contract, he chose to like do this. I think I've said this before in another video. You have to really think about the fact that he was like 16 or 17 when this contract was presented to him and this opportunity was presented to him. You're this teenage boy with this humongous dream of becoming a musician, and music is such a huge part of your life, and you have the chance to sign a major record deal with like a huge label and the like world's biggest talent scout ever, Simon Cowell. Of course you're gonna take that over nothing. Like, yes, you want to be a solo artist, but at least this is something. Not only was Zayn being overworked though, and was struggling to connect to their music and not being allowed to do what he wanted on their songs, but there was like physical appearance rules that he really didn't like too. He talked about not being allowed to grow a beard. He talked about not being allowed to dye his hair. It was just very strict and very branded. He had to appear as the Zayn that their team wanted him to be and not who he was, which kind of goes along with this whole brand thing that they pushed on him of being like the quiet, mysterious one, when he felt like that's not something that aligned with him at all. They just said, oh yeah, you can be the mysterious one. That wasn't necessarily my personality. I'm just chill. I know that a lot of people have high energy personalities and it's just not the way I am. And then he also said, in terms of me being described as a mysterious one, that was put on me as a stigma because I didn't get the chance to speak as much. The other boys' personalities were much more forward. They would answer the questions. I would let that happen because, like I said, I didn't have any creative input there. I didn't feel like I was going to say anything about it anyway. Now I get to talk about what I'm passionate about. It's nice to have the chance to speak. So it's like they're pushing this image on him like, oh, he's so quiet and mysterious, but really the other boys just had more forward personalities than him and he didn't connect with their music, so what was he going to say about it? That makes so much sense when you put it all together. It's just like when you learn about all the things that they've been through, you start to be like, okay, I get it. Like, he needed to be out of that band. And really, at the end of the day, they all did, but we'll get to that. But even though it seemed so apparent that he needed out of this band, the public was still rocked and shocked when he did leave. Now, to a lot of people, the announcement that dropped about Zayn leaving was a pure shock to the heart, and they had no idea it was coming. But others did suspect. Zayn was most definitely very distant and withdrawn for a long time leading up to him leaving, and a lot of people did notice that, and there was conversations happening about it all the time. Then he started being like missing from different One Direction events. There was this one day the boys did like a shitload of 4 promo for their album. It was just a day of interviews. Like, if you see them in these clothes, and there's so many interviews of them in these same clothes because they were just doing so much promo that day, and Zayn was missing from the whole day and didn't do any of the interviews. Nobody ever said why Zayn was missing from these interviews. Like, we never got an explanation for that. And then there was like a humongous 4 release day show going on with the Today Show that Zayn was also missing from again. It was actually like this humongous 3-day event that was going on in Orlando, Florida, and he was missing from day 1 and 2 and then magically appeared on day 3. But later it was said that he was gone because he had a stomach bug. Then we enter 2015 and the boys go on the On the Road Again tour, I'm sure you know. I'm just going to refer to this as Otra throughout this video. But yeah, during Otra they did the whole Australian leg and then part of Asia before it all went down. March 18, 2015, Zayn would do his last show as a member of One Direction, and nobody had any idea. Looking back at it now, like now knowing that that was his last show, you can really feel that sad energy if you like look back at the clips and see the show from this day. They did that little group hug. Zayn seemed very emotional. Like, those videos of them at their last show with Zayn is just like me reliving my trauma right now. When your car declines a therapy, so they bring in videos of One Direction's last concert with Zayn. Anyway, the following day, it's announced that Zayn is, quote, taking a break from tour. This was supposed to be just for, like, the remainder of the Asian leg of the shows, and then he would be back for the North American and European legs. They said Zayn has been signed off with stress and is flying back to the UK to recuperate. The band wish him well and will continue with their performances in Manila and Jakarta. So the reason fans were given for Zayn taking a break from tour was that he was stressed. So immediately fans began trending the hashtag #HaveAGoodRestZayn, and were were spreading like positive tweets around encouraging him to get better. Like genuinely believing, you know, that he would just simply come back. Like to a lot of people, it wasn't a question. It was just like, oh my God, he's stressed. He must be having mental health issues. Like, have a good rest. I can't wait to see you again. There were parts of the fandom though that were skeptical. It wasn't like everyone was just like, oh, okay, have a good break. Especially older fans, I know they were like, a break, like very skeptical of this and kind of feeling that energy of One Direction and Zayn especially kind of falling apart a little bit. But the girls were in denial. Oh my God, just reliving this. There was articles coming out slowly, like saying that Zayn was not coming back, that he was leaving the band. I vividly remember an article coming out maybe on the 23rd, 2 days before the leave, that he was working on the legal aspect of it and like getting his legal stuff in order so that he could leave the band. Again, some people were like, this is not true, because there's been rumors like this loading around the fandom since like literally 2012. Like there has been so many accusations of like Harry's going solo, One Direction's breaking up their whole career. So some people were like, we've seen this before, this is not real. But then at last, that fateful dark day did come along. 9 years ago today, March 25th, 2015, One Direction releases a Facebook post captioned, One Direction statement. This makes me sick to my stomach. I'm so for real. I haven't read the like One Direction statement of Zayn leaving in so like I can't even remember the last time I like sat and like genuinely looked at this, because when I tell you, like, I wish I was kidding when I said that it genuinely with me. Like reliving this statement is like almost like me reliving finding out that someone I love is dead. This video has been so traumatizing for me to make. Like, I hate this, but it must be done. So yeah, let's read the statement One Direction put out when Zayn left One Direction. After 5 incredible years, Zayn Malik has decided to leave One Direction. Niall, Harry, Liam, and Louis will continue as a 4-piece and look forward to the forthcoming concerts of their world tour and recording their 5th album, due to be released later this year. Zayn says, my life with One Direction has been more than I could ever have imagined, but after 5 years, I feel like it is now the right time for me to leave the band. I'd like to apologize to the fans if I've let anyone down, but I have to do what feels right in my heart. I'm leaving because I want to be a normal 22-year-old who is able to relax and have some private time out of the spotlight. I know I have 4 friends for life in Louis, Liam, Harry, and Niall. I know they will continue to be the best band in the world. One Direction say, we're really sad to see Zayn go, but we totally respect his decision and send him all of our love for the future. The past 5 years have been beyond amazing. We've gone through so much together, so we will always be friends. The 4 of us will now continue. We're looking forward to recording the new album and seeing all the fans on the next stage of the world tour. Simon Cowell says, I would like to say thank you to Zayn for everything he has done for One Direction. Since I first met Zayn in 2010, I have grown very, very fond and immensely proud of him. I have seen him grow in confidence, and I am utterly sorry to see him leave. As for One Direction, fans can rest assured that Niall, Liam, Harry, and Louis are hugely excited about the future of the band. Now that we have the announcement, allow me to tell the story of what I was doing when I found out that Zayn left One Direction. Again, this was so one of those things that you will never forget. Like, I will never, ever in my life forget what I was doing when Zayn left One Direction. Like, I will be croaking and choking and gagging and having a heart attack on my deathbed. And I will still be like, March 25th, 2015, I was doing this. Like, it's so serious. But anyway, like I said, I was like 14 at the time. I was in like 8th grade. Luckily, I was on spring break. I know so many of you guys were at school when this happened. So many people that I've heard like recount their stories were at school. I cannot imagine. But I was on spring break at this time. So I vividly remember I went to the gas station this day with my brother and I got a bag of hot fries, like Chester's hot fries. And I remember bringing them into my bedroom. Mind you, my bedroom is covered in One Direction posters. Head to toe, cannot see the walls kind of thing. So I'm sitting in my One Direction kingdom. So I'm like eating these chips. I'm going to scroll through Vine while I eat. Like, I'm having a great time. So I open the Vine app and the first thing that shows up on my feed is this One Direction creator named Kimmy. She was so iconic on One Direction Vine. Like, and it was like a 6-second clip of her bedroom wall, like just a blank wall with a caption. I don't remember what the caption said, but the caption was something like, I can't believe this is happening. Like, I'm devastated. # One Direction. Like, and I'm like, what's going on? Like, what do you mean? So I'm like, I need to see what's going on. So I go to my Stan account on Twitter. I've had a One Direction Stan account for a really long time. I think I started in like 2013. So I go into my Stan account, and when I open Twitter, my whole home feed is just flooded with tweets of people being like, oh my God, ... I can't believe this. I'm sobbing. Like, no context. Just people being like, oh my God. Some people had their profile pictures blacked out, like no picture. And I'm like, you guys. So then somehow I finally get to the statement. It's on my timeline somewhere. I see the One Direction Twitter tweet, One Direction statement. So I'm like, okay. And I vividly remember like clicking on it, and I read the first line and lost my mind. And then I remember my mom has worked from home for a long time. She started working from home like way before COVID. So she was home this day. So I just remember my mom running up the stairs and being like, she thought someone broke in. Like later she told me, like, I thought someone was in the house. You were just freaking out. So she's running up the stairs, and I'm like showing her my phone, like, Zayn left One Direction. So she comforted me. She gave me a hug. She talked me through it. She offered to get me Starbucks at the time. She was like, do you want to go to Starbucks? And then I just spent the day, for days, I was just glued to Stan Twitter, like grieving alongside my fellow One Direction stans. And we did the whole KCA voting thing where they were up for a KCA, a Kids' Choice Award, and we wanted them to win so bad to prove that we weren't too weak from Zayn leaving to like do something amazing. So I just was aggressively voting for the KCAs along with my fandoms. Okay, while we're talking about the impact of Zayn leaving One Direction, let me just put in some reactions from people finding out that Zayn left One Direction. Like, you just need to get a feel for what the vibe was.
What happened? Left One Direction. Stop! Look at this. It won't look right without him.
I wish I was dead.
It just doesn't make sense.
What's true? Someone told me what's true. Like, I'm going through the first stage of depression. I'm upset Zayn's leaving the band.
They'll always leave a spot for him when he wants to come home.
Well, guess I'm not a fan of One Direction anymore.
I remember so clearly, like, there was dozens upon, like, everyone, celebrities, brands and companies, literally just everyone, tweeting about Zayn or making a joke about Zayn. Like, just random brands and companies, other celebrities, Ellen DeGeneres, talk show host, literally just everyone was, like, jumping at the chance to get attention by, like, saying something about Zayn. When I tell you there wasn't news all over the internet like this in forever, and I still feel like nothing to this day measures up in the same way. Let's think about this together. Moment in music pop culture that has compared to the day Zayn left One Direction. I genuinely did research on this for this video, like looking into big pop culture moments that happened between 2015 and 2020 when the decade ended, and I could not find anything that compared to this. To me, the only thing you could argue is the whole Taylor versus Kimye thing and the Masters debate that went down with Big Machine and Scooter Braun. That whole thing did happen before 2020, so that was arguably really, really big too. But other than that, girl, nothing like this. There was people at the time holding these goodbye parties and theming them after funerals. There was a self-harm hashtag that was going around on Twitter for him. Zayn alone took up 5 of the biggest trending hashtags on Twitter for over 24 hours. People started to like make edits of One Direction songs with his solos cut out immediately, like right after this news broke. People had to go to their school's like counselor office when this happened. People were begging their parents to go home when this happened, crying and sobbing in the lunchroom type of thing. And this is the kind of thing that makes me wonder, like, damn, when are we gonna see this kind of absolutely unhinged lashing out and like public grieving again? It's almost like Zayn leaving One Direction set it up so that someone leaving a group could never measure up again. He set up this thing where it's like now every time someone leaves a girl group or a boy band, everyone just brings up Zayn again. Camila left Fifth Harmony and Zayn's name was all over the internet again. And then Jessie left Little Mix and the same thing happened. Like people just talk about Zayn leaving One Direction. And the impact of this is so crazy that it's still brought up so much to this day. Like it hasn't left. Next year will be 10 years since this happened and it hasn't left. Here I am making a whole video about this, like, and people will watch it. Like the impact is still so crazy. And I guess all of this just begs the question of why was this so devastating? People literally screaming and crying and hosting funerals and self-harming and skipping school. Like I couldn't find anything online about the actual like psychology and science behind this. So just in my personal, so reliable, so professional opinion, I think it's because of the parasocial relationship. I know you guys hate that phrase, but I think it's because of the parasocial relationship One Direction so carefully built and crafted for years leading up to Zayn leaving. Like the whole thing about One Direction is that they're a different kind of boy band. Do you know what I mean? Like I kind of talked about this in my evolution of boy bands video. They came along and they made it their thing to be like not like other boy bands. Like they don't dance, they don't wear matching outfits. We're just like your best friends. We're just a regular group of lads who are your best friends and we love our fans so much and we're all so close, we're a family, all these inside jokes kind of thing. They just made it a very tight-knit, I love you, you love me, we'll always be together, let's go team kind of thing. So then that created this element of almost like betrayal when Zayn left the band. People are like, whoa, I thought we were BFFs for life. I thought it was one band, one dream until we die. I think that's part of the reason people were just so utterly and upset and shocked and devastated. Another huge part of the betrayal aspect though, because One Direction's team wrote into the Facebook statement that he just wanted to be a normal 22-year-old out of the spotlight. And then he turned around and was immediately paparazzi'd with the producer like working on solo music. So people were like utterly upset and betrayed by that. Obviously Zayn would later come out and say that he left because of the mistreatment by their team and the lack of control, the toxic management situation kind of thing, not connecting with their music. And their team was not going to put that in their statement because that would make them look bad. Of course they're not going to write a statement and be like, Zayn's leaving because we're mistreating them. Of course they're gonna say like, oh, he wants to be a normal 22-year-old out of the spotlight. Zayn also did mention at one point sort of seeing the direction One Direction was going in and wanting to be the first out. So a lot of people like kind of suspected that they would be done after Otra, and they were kind of right, which is where I want to talk about the fall of One Direction as it relates to Zayn leaving. So I just want to bring some things to your brain so we can paint a nice little timeline of what happened leading up to One Direction deciding to take a hiatus. In other words, walk with me. Walk with me for a second. This is what Zayn said regarding wanting to be the first out. He said, I don't want to go into too much detail, but there was a lot of politics going on. Certain people were doing certain things. Certain people didn't want to sign contracts, so I knew something was happening. So I just got ahead of the curve. I was like, I'm just going to get out of here. I think this is done. So to understand what he's saying here, you have to understand One Direction's contracts. So allow me to talk about One Direction's contract. So the boys signed their first ever contract straight off the X Factor in December of 2010. This was a $2 million deal where they would be responsible for producing 2 albums under Psycho. So that contract was up in November 2012 after they finished Take Me Home. They signed the deal for $2 million. They crank out Up All Night and Take Me Home. Now the contract is fulfilled. But then it was reported that they re-signed another one in 2013 for 3 more years with 1 album a year guaranteed. So they would be tied to Psycho for 3 more years and give them 3 more albums. So that one would be up in 2016 after their 5th album, which was obviously Made in the AM. But the thing about that contract is that it was written into it that they would also get a humongous pay bonus after that 3rd year, unless one of the members breaks the contract by leaving the band early. Right. All right. So Zayn says on Call Her Daddy that certain members were doing certain things and didn't want to sign certain contracts. A lot of people have come to the consensus that he's talking about Harry and him not wanting to sign another One Direction contract. Hold on, me editing. I just need to protect myself real quick and say that this is not something I'm trying to pass off as factual. This is just something that a lot of people have gathered, especially considering the timeline of how things went down, which we will explore later in this video. So please put away your pitchforks. I don't feel like being dragged today. It was in a London studio in late 2014 that Styles first brought up the idea of One Direction taking a break. I didn't want to exhaust our fan base, he explains. If you're short-sighted, you can think, let's just keep touring. But we all thought too much of the group than to let that happen. You realize you're exhausted and you don't want to drain people's belief in you. Hey, don't run to comment on my video that I'm blaming Harry for One Direction's hiatus, because this was already a humongous argument in 2017. I'm not trying to bring it back. In this next clip, you're going to see me talk about why it was smart for Harry to bring it up, but I just need to stress that this was a mutual agreement. If you read his Rolling Stone article that this originally was spoken about in, it's literally stressed that he brought it up, sure, but then over time they mutually agreed and then it was decided for the good. I'm not trying to insinuate that Harry's some humongous villain in this story, because that's not it at all. And this was arguably really smart on Harry's part to be like, hey guys, maybe we need to take a hiatus. Maybe we need to pursue other things for a minute, because the fan base was falling apart in 2015. He was right. So much arguing and so much chaos through 2015 that I feel like a lot of people don't want to remember now. Like, you look back on 2015 in the One Direction fandom with rose-tinted glasses and you're like, this was great. We had all these things, but it wasn't great. I mean, parts of it were great, but it was a mess. So much arguing and chaos, and then the arguing and chaos got so much worse when Zayn left the band. People were also constantly accusing Harry of being super distant and like careless in this time, and they were like, he hates this band. It's falling apart, and people would argue about that too. And then we get to Otra, and Otra's a mess. First of all, fans didn't even want On the Road Again to happen in the first place. Directioners were fully aware by that point in their career that they were extremely overworked and they wanted them to have a break, because they just came off of Where We Are tour, and we were given another tour instead, and a lot of people were really unhappy. I get why they did it, because they wanted a tour to support the 4 album, but it oversaturated everything so much, and then it became difficult to sell out the tour. I don't know if they ended up selling it out in the end, but there was like a little bit of a struggle to sell out there in the beginning. And that was even before Zayn left. Like, this tour went on sale and they were struggling to sell it out like they did with previous tours before Zayn even left the band. Like, it wasn't a Zayn thing. It was just like, it felt like in this time, One Direction stans were really angry at their team for a lot of things all the time. But Zayn wanted out first. He wanted out now. He literally said, I completely selfishly wanted to be the first person to go and make my own record. If I'm being completely honest with you, I was like, I'm going to jump the gun here for the first time. I'm a passive dude, but when it comes to my music and my business, I'm serious about it and I'm competitive. So I wanted to be the first to go and do my own thing. So if we paint a picture, what does this all look like together? So the boys are contractually obligated to stay in One Direction until the end of Made in the AM for this bonus pay. Harry brings it up in late 2014 that the band should go on hiatus and not sign a new contract after Made in the AM. Zayn jumps the gun and leaves first, breaking their current contract by leaving in the middle of the tour before Made in the AM is even recorded. This essentially betrays the other members of One Direction, because now they don't get that bonus pay. Also because it was in the middle of the tour, so they probably didn't have much time to rehearse without Zayn, and they were kind of left high and dry. Side note, Louis doesn't even want One Direction to end. He's fully not prepared for that, but he really has no choice. So One Direction decide on the hiatus, and it's announced to the public in August of 2015. I think when you look at it like this, it adds so much to think about in terms of Zayn leaving the band. On one hand, yes, he was lacking creative control, feeling suffocated by this toxic management. He needed out. It was anxiety-inducing. He became ill. Like, he needed out, and that is okay. But on the other hand, I understand why fans would be pissed at him, because he left in the middle of tour. I feel like I'm walking on eggshells. Like, I don't know. I don't want to get destroyed for talking about this. It's just what happened. It's just, I don't know. Overall, I do think that the decision to not sign a new contract after Made in the AM was very smart and ultimately beneficial looking at everything that has happened now, especially in their wildly successful solo careers. It was all very hard at the time, but now when you have more information and you look back on everything that's happened, I get it. Boy bands and girl groups have just never ever been built to last forever in that way. I mean, to be the biggest boy band in the world and then do your own solo thing and then just never do anything together again, it feels very wild to me. I'm sure they'll come running at some point and do like a little performance or maybe a tour if we're lucky, something, you know what I mean? But I'm confident we'll see One Direction together again in some capacity. I don't know what that's going to be, but in some way we will get that closure, that little last hurrah from them, you know? Thank you for watching my exploration on the impact of Zayn leaving One Direction and things leading up to their hiatus. It got a little bit messy. There was drama. Give it a like if you enjoyed this. Leave me a comment. Let me know your thoughts. If you haven't subscribed already, stick around. I love talking about music, pop culture. Lots of album reactions coming your way pretty soon. I'm so excited to react to new Taylor. I'm excited to react to new Zayn. I hope we're all doing good. I hope we're all doing wonderful. I hope you have an okay March 25th, even though it can be a little bit triggering and traumatizing. And I'm sorry that I made it worse with this video. I will see you in the next one.